Welcome, everybody. I will be your host for today's Lunch and Learn. My name is Jared. I'm on the training team, and I'll be here answering some questions for you guys. Before I go into the hand raised question, I'll get to you, Wade, in just 1 second. I'm going to answer a question that we got submitted earlier today. So the question was, if I have a rule and I need to check if a date is empty, how do I do that? Typically, right, if we have string data, so I'm going to go just use the initiating, where's the string? Yeah, initiating full name. And if you want to check to see if a text is empty, you have this is empty text available. Now, if you want to do this for the date time, that's where it kind of gets tricky. How do you check is empty for a date time? You don't have a is empty. The answer to that question is you just merely use the exists option that will tell you if the date value exists, meaning if it has a value or not. So I'm going to close and save this so you can see. And then now when I debug this rule, or actually there's one thing I need to show. So I've set it to ignore so that the input to this rule is going to pass in a blank value. And what you see here is when I debug, and then I look at the inputs, you see that no value exists returns false, and that's true. And if I do the opposite and I set it to a constant date time, sure, we'll choose today. And then now when I debug, it will return true because that date does exist. That's the answer to that question.
Thank you, Jared. This is different than is not, right? This is like is empty, right?
Say that one more time.
Exists checks to see if it's empty, and this is different than is null, right? This is like if the value is null, what does this rule return, true or false?
Not sure, let's find out. So I'll click this, we'll set this to null, and we'll debug, and let's see what it does. So it considers null as no value.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. Is there a way to warn or prevent users from closing a form using the X on the top right? Yeah, you can actually remove that option altogether, and you can create a custom close option. So for example, let me build that real quick. So let's say I have a form, show form. I'm going to create a new form. This is going to be just the default form, not a simple form. I'll say this is the demo form. And I'm going to have a button, and I'll have a text box, and we'll say this is the first name. And then I'm going to close and save this, and this will be my form. So what the question is asking, just so everyone on the call knows what we're talking about, is that whenever you debug a form, there's always this X above the form. And so the question is, how do we prevent users from closing the form using that? What you can do is in the form setup, I may have to click around, but I believe you can set it to, no, it's the title. There's a way you can remove the actual top part of that form. Edit form, pick mobile form, use form title. I already clicked on that. Do window. Just bear with me a couple seconds. I know I've done this before, and it's somewhere in the settings. Own window, design size, sub dialog. There we go, right here. It's very hard to find. So when you click on the form, look at the properties to the right of the form, scroll all the way down, and then you have to expand sizing, expand sub dialog, and then you'll have this option to hide title bar. When you check this box to hide the title bar, and then you debug, what happens is that should disappear. Let me actually save it. Let me run this flow and not debug it. So now when I run the flow, the title bar is gone. So I can't click the X on the top right over here. I can only proceed the flow through this option here. So I'll type in some values, send the button through. So that is a design thing to be aware of. Even when you set it, let's see, where's the form setup? Then you go to sub dialog, and when you hide the title bar, if you debug it, you'll still have the X option. So to truly test it, you'll need to close out of the flow and actually run the flow to see if that title bar goes away. Can be warned when user closes browser tabs. See, I don't think we have that capability. No, I can take that offline and ask, but I don't think you can warn users about closing a browser tab, because I believe that would something be on the Chrome or that specific browser. What you could do if you need to have that warning is you can probably go to the form and just add a label to the top and give like manual instructions and just say, do not close tab while form is running. And then you can have that and specify that, but there's no specific process that kind of outlines like, hey, don't close the tab. I'll check back to make sure, but I'm pretty sure there's no way to automatically warn and block users from preventing that other than just having a label. Let's see, I'm going to ask that question here, support. Anyone else have any questions? You can come off mute. See,
Okay,
I think Wade.
This is Wade. I don't know if you're ready for me or not.
Oh, I'm ready for you. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. Question about is there a way to like have multiple outcomes for maybe a rule or a truth table? Like for a rule, there's just a true false outcome, like path 1 and 2, and then for a truth table, I've only seen it's like just done. But is there a way to have like a rule and then, well, if this is true, go path 1. If this is true, go path 2, and then so you end up with maybe like 6 outcomes out of a certain rule in path 1, path 2, path 3.
So is this like you're needing to like run a different process based on the data that gets passed into it?
Correct.
Okay. Let's see. So I'll answer 2 ways. First, I don't believe, let's just create a rule. I don't think there's a way to have multiple outcome paths. But let's check. Recent test rule. Let me edit this. And so, right, you can have a show missing results. Can I add new output data? This is going to be test data. Okay, such as default output data that adds that. So there's no really way to add additional branches. But for your situation, what we would do if I need to evaluate data and run a different process based on what data I get through, we would actually use runtime selection. Have you heard of that before? No? All right, let me show you. There's actually a great project in our training that we do that illustrates this. Sprint example builds, sprint 3. So in sprint 3, we teach our students how to use this insurance process that has to run based on a certain client that gets passed in. So for example, to do a runtime selection, I'll talk about it and then I'll demonstrate it on my local so you can kind of see how we build it. So what this truth table does is you can do it one of 2 ways. You build a truth table or you build some type of database constants that has a list of IDs that need to run. So what does this truth table look like? I'll show you this perspective. Essentially what it does is you say, hey, I have a piece of data here. If it equals this, I want you to output this ID. If it equals client B, I want you to output this ID. That's kind of how it flows. Now, when it outputs that ID is the ID of the specific designer element you want to run. So for example, could be a flow, could be another rule. In this case, we use a rule set. So over here in my process right here, I actually have this rule set run a specific instance based on that flow set ID. So this truth table outputs that selected ID, and then based on whatever data runs through, it will run that process. All right, so that's the kind of the description of it. I'm going to switch back to my local and I'm going to show you how to configure it. So let's say I have these 3 flows. I'm going to say this is, say, flow 1. And this is going to be it's just going to be a show pop-up that says hi. And we'll say constant, hello. I will say constant hello world. Specify the user. I'm just going to use the current account that I'm logged into so we can see this pop up. And this is going to be my runtime selection flow 1. I'm going to create one more, flow 2, perfect. And this time I'm just going to show that form that I previously just created for the previous question. Recent and demo form, and this is just going to go to the end. Perfect. And close and save. Awesome. And then for this test flow, I'm actually going to change this one to actually run the different options. So how we do this is, like I said, we'll either have a truth table or some type of constants. I'm going to do the truth table route for right here, just because it's easier. If you're wondering when would you use the truth table and when would you use the system constants, or like store a database table with a system constants for that, it's all a question of scalability. If you're using this once or twice, just use the truth table route. If you're going to be using this and you needed to be able to add different processes once you have data run through it, so like, hey, we have to add flow 3 or flow 4 or flow 5 into the calculations, then you would use a system constants data table tied to an external truth table. So that's the difference between when you use one or the other. All right, so this is going to be the selector truth table. All right, and then I'm going to say some input data. This is going to be the flow name. Then I'll say if a flow name equals, and then equals flow 1, and then flow 2. So basically I'm saying I'm going to call this flow 1 or flow 2. This could be your insurance claim process or your medical billing process, whatever it is. And then on the output, instead of outputting a Boolean, I'm going to set this to a string. Now, as you remember from this truth table, I'm switching over to the register server. We have these string values. Where do I get these IDs? These IDs come straight from the designer elements that I configure. So I'm going to switch back to my local host. So now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open up another tab so I can switch back and forth. And let's see, I'm in real test. That's where I'm in. All right, so I have flow 1, flow 2, and a test. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the IDs of flow 1 by going to manage and get the flow ID. This flow ID is the primary key to all of the designer elements. So if you create a designer element, which is a rule, a form, a flow, whatever it is, you can get the ID, copy the text. I'm going to flip back to my other tab, paste that for flow, that ID for flow 1, flip back. I'm going to grab the ID for flow 2, copy the text, and I'll put that there. And so now I have those two different flow IDs. And for this circumstance, I'm just going to say ignore for the default match because it's not used at this moment. Close and save this. And so now all I need to do is, this is going to be the selected flow ID. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another quick form. This may not be your use case. You may have something else that could trigger it. I'm going to create a user manual process where I can select which flow I want to run. Let's see, let me pick create form. Let's see, this is run the form. And then I'm going to have a drop down list over here, and it's just going to have the data type string, static, and it's just going to say flow 1, flow 2, and then we'll have a button to run that process. And then I'll close and save this. All right, so this is just a lot of the pre-setup for it. The actual part, like this is the meat and potatoes, as I'd like to say, that you'll want to remember. So on every single run rule, every single run subflow, you'll always have this option to choose the advanced part, advanced section for those steps, and you can say runtime selection. And when you select runtime selection, that gives you the target ID. This target ID is that designer element ID that I mentioned earlier. So when I attach this to this process here, notice that there's no Notice that there's no done path on it. So the thing that you have to be aware of, whenever you create a runtime select ID, even though I'm not going to call, even though I'm going to call a dynamic flow, this is the tricky part, so bear with me. You still have to give this subflow a template flow. So what that means is it has to have like the same inputs and the same outputs. If you are using assignments in that subflow, then your template flow needs to have an assignment. But it doesn't mean that it will always have an assignment, even if the other flows you have in your process don't have assignments. A little hard to explain, but I'm going to demonstrate it. So I'm going to create a new flow, and this is just going to be called my template flow, right? And in this template flow, right, I'm going to have an add task step. So this is an assignment. I'm going to pick existing. We'll say this is the trainer form. I'm going to add the button here. It's going to be assigned to admin@decisions.com. It's going to be test, test, right? So I have, so this is template flow has an assignment. But if you've noticed, let me go back to my other flows and let's go to flow one. Flow one doesn't have a task. So the question could be, is this task going to be run? And the answer is no. Once you add the ID from the truth table, selected flow first, it will merely just run whatever flow that was called. So if I do flow name and I run the selected, oops, is this not outputting? It's going to be selected flow. Perfect. And then I'm going to grab that selected flow here. And so now when I run this, you'll see what happens. I'm going to run flow one, boom. And then when I look at it, see my pop-up ran. Even though my template flow has an add task step, the template flow merely just means, hey, I need a roadmap or a general idea of what the flows that you have that you'll have me call will have. So that's why we recommend when you build the template flow, have it have the same inputs and outputs you're expecting from all the flows you'll call, and give it an add task step just in case if you have assignments run in the process. So if I click debug and I run flow two, boom, and then now I have this demo form that I created earlier and just say, this is runtime selection. Did that answer your question, Wade? Do you need other further clarification? It is a little complicated.
I guess the difference with mine is that after it runs that template flow, that subflow, it's not done. It needs to take the result from that and put it back into the original flow.
Ah, so okay.
That's what the difference with mine is. But I guess I'd still be stuck at the same. I was just trying not to have a bunch of if statements right before, because it would all go off a field called type, and that type maybe has 6 different options on it. And each one might have different data transformations it needs to go through, but in the end it'll have the same outcome with each one of them. It just has to get to a roundabout way. So it's like it needs to go through like a data transformation subflow, and it's different for each one of the 6. But
sure,
to continue through the flow after that.
Yeah, and this can accommodate that. All you'll have to do then is on the template flow you're calling is just define the type of output you will be expecting. So if it's like data, a string, or data number, data date, right? Because if you have the 3 different types, and we'll do like data string, then all you do is just define that on the outputs. And then obviously the flows you're going to call are going to have those parts outputted. So let's say, let me go to my flow 2. Let's say I want to output that string that I chose from the first name right here. So what all I have to do is I have to just define the exact same name. It might be different. Let me see if it'll work differently. So first name. And so now, since I've told the template flow to expect data coming out of it, when I run it now, let's go back to here, the data will be output as well. So I'm going to run flow 2. right? And say this is output data. And then you'll see from here, when I go to the output data, it outputted that string from that dynamically called subflow. So all you have to do is just make sure that the data types on your template flow that you're choosing for the runtime selection has like the 3 or 4 or 5 objects that you can potentially output, and then it will output the output you're expecting. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right, Radley, how can I help you?
Hey, Jared. So I'm starting my journey into using named sessions. It sounds like that's what's kind of recommended over a guest user, so that's the direction I'm going.
Mhm.
In my scenario, I have really kind of like a whistleblower type workflow that I built in. So I want to make it anonymous to anybody in the world with that URL.
Mhm.
So is it okay to just, I built a dummy user and then I linked the name session to that dummy user. Is it
Mhm.
okay to just use the name session as many times as people want to submit or start a workflow or submit a form? Or what's the best way to approach this?
Yeah, I think the way you approach it is fine. You can use the
Okay.
name session as many times as you need to. And
Okay.
you can create multiple for different accounts if you want them to be different. So
And is there anything that I need to do within the workflow itself to log out that name session or delete that name session? Or I mean, do I just let it be?
typically you let it be. I don't think I haven't seen anyone use a process where you just delete the name session.
Okay.
Because it's only active, if I'm not mistaken, it's only active for like, so when a user calls that flow, it calls it by that name session. Once that integration ends, then it's not an active session, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just not really sure I don't know what I don't know at this point with name session.
Sure.
The other thing I wanted to ask, kind of related to that,
Mhm.
this workflow, this form could be submitted by staff members, so who would have logins to decisions and could actually be logged into decisions when they go to SharePoint and click on the URL to report something.
Mhm.
During my testing, I found that if I'm logged in but use the name session URL, it submits the workflow. It says that it's created by me, and I want to
Mhm.
guarantee that people have anonymity always. Is there a logout parameter that I could put onto the URL to ensure people are logged out when they're submitting this form?
Ooh, that's a good question. Let me see. So
I didn't see
log
any.
out.
When you build the
Yeah, go into the security and name sessions.
okay, thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Let me add no. See, it looks like it's just tied. So I'll take that one offline and ask, what's your email?
ragnew@maf.org.
Gotcha. Could you put that in the chat to me?
I can.
Thank you. Because what I'll do is I'll ask, to be honest, I'm not too sure, but awesome. If anyone's curious about that name session thing, just put your email in the chat and I'll compile a list. And once I ask my core devs, I'll email you guys a response.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Appreciate that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Anybody else? I'm gonna type that question in now. Is there any way to specify a logout parameter on a session? Asking another chat too. I wonder if I'll get a response from here. Core devs, core devs, core devs. There we go, support dev. Might also mess around with it. I wonder if there's a flow step that after you run it, I wonder if it will automatically log out the current user. Log out. Hey, log out current user. So I'm wondering, so while I don't know there's a setting to actually, let's see how this works. I want to test it out. All right. Let's say I show a form. Let's complete the form together. Recent, run the form. Sure. What's this? Oh, did I actually already have it? Darn it. I deleted that form. Come back. Recent, run the form, trainer form, demo form. That's what I want. All right, put this in here and it should, that validation should go away. It doesn't, here, remove it. Okay, cool. All right, now I want to see how this works. So now, which flow? I forgot which flow is. I need better naming for my flows because it always starts. All right, so now when I run this flow, let's see how this works. All right, this is a logout example. Boom. Cool. Well, I did not know we had that step. So I would use that step, Redley. I think that might. So if you add that to your, if you have a certain process that runs on a named session, you could add that step, and that could allow you to have that logout behavior you want, so you can't just reuse it. So I'll still keep you apprised with once I get from the core devs if there's anything specific on a name session, but I believe that will also work on a name session. We could actually, I'm going to try that right now just so we can see it. Name session. I'm going to add a name session. This is going to be my test session. I'm going to tie it to my admin account, save. Then I'm going to go into my rule tests. I'm going to go to, was it flow 2? Yep. I'm going to create an integration. It's going to be user interface. And we're going to use the test session. Sure, additional options. Nope, I think we're good. So now I'm just going to call this process. Let's submit. So now I'm just going to close this, and then let's just run it, see what happens. I'll do this. Hello world. Button. Flow complete, open portal. Okay, so that login page. Can you test that on a non-admin account? This will have very limited permissions. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. Let me create a new user account. And I'm going to make sure, I'm actually going to set this as, let me rename this flow just so we can know this is running a log out user step. All right, so now we have that. And I will not give name session permissions to use the portal. All right. All right, perfect. That's awesome. So I will create an account with those settings and we'll see how it behaves. So I'm going to create an account. This is going to be limit@decisions.com. Put in a password, Is it going to be, oh, it has to be one of those. Okay, hold on. Email is not valid. Oh, I got to continue uppercase. Okay. Man, password security is important. Admin. All right. I forgot it. All right, perfect. Hopefully I can remember that. Can use portal would be not on the table. It is active. Let's see, I want to make sure it has to be a member of the all users group, I think. So really restricted, only all users group, create account. Okay, so this can't access the portal. Let me run this test. All right, and then what I'm going to do, let's create another name session with that one. This is going to be name session. More limits, or should say restricted. Pick limit at decision.com. Save. I'm going to, let's see, manage permissions for this. Make sure that all users can use the stuff that's in here. Okay, save permissions. So now I'm going to run the flow or get the integration interface. And I'm going to name using name restricted. So that has the restricted name session. And I'm going to copy this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my personal Google and run it so it doesn't really have access to that. And let's see what happens. All right. Test, and I could run that flow. Open the portal. Limit does not have permission to use the portal. So it shows this here. So that will do it. They'll just have this weird error that's kind of not very helpful, but it accomplishes the task. What? There's something else we could do. In this process, I'm not sure what your process entails, but I know what you can do. Let me move that back. Is you can just add an end form. Let me remove this to the flow, like an actual custom end form. Pick, create end form. Create new. This is the example end form. And then over here, I'm just going to add a label that just says like process complete. And then now when I run it, it won't ask them to log in. It should just show that just that message. Restricted. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to my, again, my personal Google Chrome so that we can test this kind of action. So then I run it and I say, hello, button, process complete. So now this doesn't say, hey, error logging in, just says process complete to the left and then you can close. Or does it not work? Or they can navigate off. You can also hide that close button since it doesn't do anything. So that could be a cleaner way to have it happen, Radley. Let's see. You can just use open URL or display message option on the end form. Yeah. Yeah. The reason why I didn't want to use the open URL over here. Well, I guess you're right. It uses that same user account, so it wouldn't matter. Yep. Let's see. So that's a weird error. That could be something I need to report because it's just kind of looping. Let me refresh it. Yeah, that was strange. I think the reason why it does that is because you could do that too. Yeah, you're correct. End form can add navigate to somewhere else using the end form session step. So yeah. Yeah, I hope that helps. Let me check my Slack. I want to see if one of the core devs. Ooh, they did. So yeah, nothing yet, still waiting. My pleasure. All right, VT, do you have any questions? All right, if there are no questions, I'll be on the call for about 5 more minutes. And if no one asks any questions, we'll wrap it up for today. Thank you so much for attending. All right, I'm going to say that is a wrap. So thank you so much for attending. I think a couple of additional announcements are here's just in case you missed it. There's end of life support for some of the versions of decisions. I think major version 6 in June 2021, cessation of support services announced December 2022. I would just reach out to the support team and I would say ask for clarifications. But there's just a couple of changes that are happening in the future. So beware of those. And we also have a product roadmap on April 6th, which will be very interesting that you can register for from every Thursday at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to learn about the different features of decisions, of version. I can't talk. The future versions of decisions. So, all righty. Thank you so much. Have a great day.